Title: The Screen's Fury. In the sleepy town of Brightview, where the streets gleamed with pastel-colored houses and conversant neighbors, the local cinema was a den of nostalgia and comfort. Its aging marquee held memory-laden titles that sparked joy. Families flocked to watch movies from a bygone era, laughing along with relics of cinema's golden age. But the theater, now managed by the reclusive yet strangely charismatic Herman Green, maintained a curious secret. Every time the films rolled, the boundaries between fiction and reality blurred ever so slightly. It began on an ordinary Friday night. A handful of regulars gathered for the weekly screening of horror classics. The flickering images of ominous figures and surreal monsters danced across the screen. Thanks to an experimental projector Herman had revamped, the experience promised more thrills than ever. Little did anyone know that this latest device had an insidious connection to something dark and powerful. As the feature film began, the familiar opening score twisted into an unsettling dissonance. The screen's glow pulsated erratically, casting wavering shadows that flickered about the room. People laughed off the technical hiccups, attributing it to old cinema quirks. But in the depths of the audience, a figure clad in darkness began to loom, flickers of characters from forgotten corners of celluloid nightmares stirring to life. The first to break free from the screen was the infamous Drive. Crazor, the deranged scientist from the 80s cult classic, Matter of Madness. With a ghastly grin stretching from ear to ear, he lurched forward into the aisle, his arms outstretched as if to welcome this new reality. The audience gasped and applauded, thinking it was a well-orchestrated stunt. But the air grew dense, and laughter soon morphed into screams. He wasn't alone. Other grotesque beings slithered out from the screen, each more terrifying than the last. The tall woman, with limbs that warped and twisted unnaturally, danced her way into existence, her laughter echoing with a spine-chilling eeriness. A string of foul-smelling, grotesque zombies shuffled behind her, their snarls growing louder, more feral. Panic ensued. People climbed over each other, struggling to flee this living film. Herman, reeling in disbelief, darted to the projection booth, desperately trying to turn off the monstrous reel. But the horror was no mere projection. It was awash in malignant magic, pulling the very essence of terror into their world. Quote, as the lights flickered and the eerie score crescendoed, mere shadows began to take shape around the walls, forming a barrier. The box office was locked. Dr. Crazor raised his hands, and in a nightmarish crescendo, he declared, "You cannot escape the reel of terror. Welcome to our world." Outside, the moon hung, a ghostly sentinel against the darkness. The distant sounds of chaos erupted as the monsters began to pour out of other theaters, hungry for suffering. The townsfolk, who had shuddered at tales of the unknown, were confronted by the things of nightmares, grotesque figures of their childhood fears. Amidst the pandemonium, Anna, an aspiring filmmaker and passionate horror aficionado, emerged as an unlikely heroine. With determination burning in her chest, she confronted Drive. Crazor, realizing that recognizing and confronting her fears, those very fears that inspired her art, was the only way to fight back. "Your story ends here," she yelled, brandishing a prop knife she had brought to the screening. The absurdity of it granted her confidence, igniting courage. "You are nothing but a relic of fear. You feed off our dread, but you have lost your power over me." The crowd, realizing that their fear gave strength to these abominations, began to chant together. "You have no power. You are fiction." As each voice grew stronger, the dark figures writhed as if caught in a gale, fluctuating at the mercy of their burgeoning courage. Herman, in the projection booth, grasped the controls, sweat cascading down his brow. As Anna's chant pierced through the cacophony around them, he frantically unplugged various wires, attempting to sever the connection. The projector sputtered, steam rising from its guttural pain. In a final standoff, Anna lunged at Drive. Crazor, and as steel met shadow, she found herself dragged into a whirlwind of light and terror. The theater trembled under the weight of their combined will, until the power of belief flickered and surged until finally, there was silence. The shadows of horror convulsed, and one by one, they dissolved back into mere pixels. The audience sank to their knees, breathless. As the projector fell quiet and the lights restored, the remnants of the nightmares coiled back into the screen, leaving only echoes of their wicked laughter. Outside, Dawn crested the horizon, washing away the horror. In Brightview, the night would go down as an unsettling memory, but for Anna, the experience would become the plot for her next film, a story of strength, courage, and the unbreakable power of belief over fear. But as the audience exited, they couldn't shake the feeling that the cinema was not quite done with its secrets. And as the sun set another day, someone caught the glimmer of a figure in the shadows. A grin lurking in the darkness, watching, waiting.